Before online multiplayer, before battle passes, before voice chat, there was one screen, 2 controllers, and absolute chaos. The 90s were the golden era of beat-em-up co-op games, where friendships were tested, buttons were smashed, and arcades were packed. I'm Seven, and this is GameFlex. Today, we're diving into the 30 greatest beat-em-up co-op games of the 1990s. Let's step back into the golden age. 30. Growl. If you grew up in arcades, you probably remember this one without even realizing it. Growl wasn't about saving the world, it was about saving animals. You were fighting poachers, smashing crates, and throwing enemies across the screen, while jungle chaos exploded around you. It wasn't flashy like Capcom's biggest hits, but it had something special. 4-player energy, the kind where everyone crowds the machine, elbows touching, yelling over each other. It felt loud, it felt alive, and that's what arcades were all about. '29. Rival Turf. This was classic SNES rental weekend energy. Rival Turf might not be remembered as the greatest, but if you were 10 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a friend, it didn't matter. You were punching thugs in alleyways and feeling like action heroes. The animations were simple, the music was raw, but the couch co-op, that's where the magic was. It wasn't about perfection, it was about playing together. 28. Violent Storm. Konami knew how to make arcades pop. Violent Storm had color, personality, and that perfect arcade rhythm. The hits felt heavy, the backgrounds were alive, and when you played with a friend, it turned into a screen-filling explosion of chaos. It wasn't the biggest name of the decade, but if you found it in an arcade, you stayed. And you probably spent more coins than you meant to. 27. Metamorphic Force. This one felt wild in the best way possible. You didn't just punch enemies, you transformed into beasts mid-fight. Wolves, bears, mythical creatures ripping through waves of enemies. For a 90s kid, that was mind-blowing. It felt edgy, different, almost rebellious. And that transformation moment, that's the kind of thing you still remember 30 years later. 26. Bucky O'Hare. Bright colors, fast action, tight co-op pacing. Bucky O'Hare had that smooth arcade flow where you and your friend actually had to coordinate. It wasn't button mashing, it was rhythm. You'd clear one side of the screen while your friend handled the other. You felt like a team, that teamwork feeling. That's something modern online games rarely capture the same way. 25. Splatterhouse 2. Now this one was different. Dark, bloody, heavy. When you played Splatterhouse 2 on the Genesis late at night, it felt almost forbidden. Like you were playing something you weren't supposed to. The sound effects hit hard, the enemies were disturbing, and the atmosphere was thick. For a lot of 30-year-olds today, this was their first taste of horror gaming, before survival horror even became a genre. 24. Power Rangers, the movie. If you were a kid in the 90s, this wasn't just a game, it was an event. You watched the show, you saw the movie, and then suddenly you were the Ranger, fighting side by side with your friend. The sprites were big, the colours were bright, the combat was satisfying, it felt like your Saturday morning cartoon had jumped into your living room. 23. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Before the movie version improved things, this one laid the groundwork. It wasn't about deep mechanics, it was about fantasy, about feeling like you and your friend were part of something bigger. When the screen filled with enemies, and you both hit your special attacks at the same time, that feeling was pure childhood joy. 22. Batman Returns. Now this was heavy. The SNES version especially felt gritty. The punches had weight, the throws felt brutal. Gotham looked dark and dangerous. It wasn't colourful arcade fun. It was moody, almost cinematic. And when you played co-op, it felt like you were cleaning the streets of Gotham together. That atmosphere stuck with people. 21. Spider-Man and Venom, Maximum Carnage. If you owned a Genesis or SNES in the mid-90s, you remember that red cartridge. Maximum Carnage felt intense. The music was aggressive, the enemies kept coming, and the difficulty, brutal, but that's what made it special. You and your friend would sit there trying to survive just one more stage, passing the controller, blaming each other, laughing when you both got knocked down at the same time. It wasn't polished like Capcom's arcade titles, but it had heart and it had attitude. 20. Sengoku 3. By the time Sengoku 3 arrived on Neo Geo, beat-em-ups were evolving. The animations were smoother, the combos were cleaner, the pacing felt modern before modern existed. If you found this in an arcade, it felt premium, like this was next level stuff. For adults today looking back, Sengoku 3 feels like the bridge between old school brawlers and the combo-heavy action games that came later. 19. Night Slashers. Night Slashers felt like a horror movie that let you fight back. Zombies, monsters, blood splashes. It had personality. It had edge. In arcades it stood out. Darker tone, heavier vibe. And playing co-op made it feel even more intense. You weren't just clearing streets, you were surviving them. "18. Armored Warriors. This one was different. You weren't just fighting, you were inside mechs, swapping parts, customizing on the fly. It felt futuristic, strategic. For players in their 30s now, this was one of those games you discovered randomly in an arcade and never forgot. It felt advanced, ahead of its time. 17. The King of Dragons. Capcom mixed RPG elements into a beat-em-up, and it worked beautifully. You leveled up, your armor changed, your character grew stronger, and suddenly co-op wasn't just about surviving, it was about progression. It felt deeper, more meaningful, and that sense of growth, that's what made you want to keep feeding coins into the machine. 16. Knights of the Round. Before Dark Souls, before medieval action games became serious, there was Knights of the Round. Sword swings felt powerful, armor upgrades made you look stronger, the soundtrack felt heroic. Playing this with a friend felt epic, like you were part of a legend. For many 90s kids, this was their first taste of medieval fantasy action done right. 15. Undercover Cops. Cyberpunk streets, heavy footsteps, hard punches. Undercover Cops felt gritty in a way that stood out. The hits had weight, the enemies looked dangerous. It wasn't cheerful, it wasn't flashy, it felt serious. And that seriousness made co-op feel intense. You weren't just having fun, you were surviving. "14. Battletoads and Double Dragon. Chaos, that's the word. This crossover was loud, ridiculous, and brutally hard. But when you and a friend actually made progress together, it felt earned. The animations were wild, the attacks were exaggerated, the difficulty was punishing. But it was memorable, and sometimes that's more important than perfect design. 13. Golden Axe. The Revenge of Death. Add a 4-player medieval mayhem in the arcade. Big sprites, huge enemies, dramatic spells filling the screen. It felt grand. When you stood in front of that cabinet with 3 other players, it wasn't just a game, it was an event. 12. Golden Axe 2. For Genesis owners, this was home co-op magic. Maybe it wasn't as flashy as the arcade version, but it was yours. You'd sit on the couch arguing about who gets the dragon, saving magic for boss fights, and trying not to accidentally hit each other. It was simple, but it was unforgettable. 11. The Punisher. This one hit differently. It felt mature, violent, heavy. The gunplay added intensity and the combat felt powerful. It wasn't colourful chaos, it was gritty justice. And for older players now, this was one of those games that felt grown up at the time. 10. Final Fight. This is the blueprint. Before everything else, there was Final Fight. Cody, Guy, Hager, the weight of the punches, the street setting, the music. It created the formula that shaped the entire decade. 9. X-Men Arcade. 6 players. That cabinet felt massive. The screen was huge. The chaos was beautiful. Hearing Welcome to Die in a crowded arcade is a core memory for many 90s kids. This was superhero co-op at its peak. 8. Dungeons and Dragons, Tower of Doom. Suddenly, beat-em-ups had branching paths, choices, character builds. It wasn't just left to right punching anymore, it felt deeper, smarter, more immersive. 7. Dungeons and Dragons, Shadow over Mystara, even deeper, loot, magic, strategy. It blurred the line between RPG and beat 'em up. Looking back now, this game feels almost modern in design. 6. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, guns, incredible pixel art. It had everything: smooth combat, memorable bosses, replay value for days. For many 30-year-olds today, this was peak Capcom arcade magic. 5. Alien vs Predator. Fast, fluid, brutal. Every character felt powerful. The pixel art still holds up today. This wasn't just good, it was elite. 4. The Simpsons Arcade. 4 players, bright colors, familiar characters. This was family chaos in the best possible way. It wasn't about difficulty, it was about fun, and that's why people still remember it. 3. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Turtles in time. Throwing foot soldiers at the screen, time travel levels, that soundtrack. If you were a kid in the 90s, this was the arcade dream. 2. Streets of Rage. 2. The music alone is legendary. The combat is balanced perfectly. Every character feels different. It's smooth, clean, timeless. Even today, it still feels right. 1. Guardian Heroes. Released on the Sega Saturn, Guardian Heroes wasn't just another beat-em-up, it was something different. Multiple paths, branching storylines, character progression, on-screen chaos with RPG depth. You didn't just punch enemies, you chose your direction. You leveled up, you made decisions that changed the outcome. And that co-op mode? Pure magic. You and a friend juggling enemies across multiple planes, spells flying everywhere, huge bosses filling the screen. For many 90s players, this wasn't just a beat-em-up, it was the moment the genre evolved. It proved brawlers could be deeper, smarter, bigger. Guardian Heroes wasn't the loudest game of the decade, but it might have been the most ambitious, and that's why it takes the crown. The 90s weren't just about games, they were about sitting next to someone, sharing a controller, and fighting through the same screen together. No online lobbies, no updates, just pure co-op chaos. If this brought back memories, subscribe to GameFlex. I'm 7, and every game gets its flex. See you in the next one.